and today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout tags. So I love this tag. I love the fact that like around this time in BookTube everybody's doing the same tag, everybody's answering the same questions. I love that sort of like general experience. It's the same as like around Christmas time when everybody's doing their like top 10 books of the year's videos. So I really enjoy watching them and making them. So first of all, kicking it off with the most important question, I guess, best book you've read so far. So I cannot choose and I will be picking two. And then the first one of these is An Orchestra of Minorities by Chigozie Obioma. This is a Nigerian book. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2019, which is the reason why I read it. But I also was totally surprised with this one because I hadn't really heard too many people say too much about it, you know. When people were talking about the shortlist for the Booker Prize and mentioning like which books they thought were going to win, this book seemed like it was always being left out. And I don't know whether it's because it was published in January, and so by the time that the Booker Prize shortlist is announced in like September, October or something like that, then this one was already like out for so long that people had forgotten it. I don't know. But so in this we are following Chinonso, who is a simple chicken farmer in Nigeria. He is quite content with the life that he set out for himself. He's doing what he loves and he is making enough money doing so. But then he meets a young girl called Ndali, and he kind of prevents her from committing suicide, and at that point a strong bond between the two emerges. But the problem is that she's from a wealthy family in Nigeria and they very much look down upon him. This book is a very harrowing book in which we're looking at the sort of like total destruction of this personality that we meet at the beginning, you know, this content, happy, naive farmer boy, and by the end of the book the character you'll be looking at will be totally different than the one that you were introduced to in the beginning, because adversity and prejudice and all of those things will have definitely destroyed him and changed him for the worse. But I won't go too deep into it. I have a full review for it. I will link it down below. The other favorite book for this year is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. I do not yet have a full review for this, but this will also be coming your way in the coming weeks. Still need to film it. But so this totally surprised me. This is being like marketed as the Black Bridget Jones Diary, but it's so much more. It is all that, you know. It is a young girl who is from Jamaican descent. Her name is Queenie and she is struggling with her life. Her boyfriend has just kind of he's tried to break up with her. She's kind of put it in the light of like, let's go on a break. But so she's very much struggling with letting him go. She's very much still clinging to him, not giving him the space that he needs. She's very much resorting to like casual relationships with men in order to process her grief. She is having problems at work because of all of this, because she's having so many problems focusing on things, and it's going to look at, you know, the total destruction of her life in some sense. It's going to very much feel like you're watching a train wreck happen, but it's going to be talking about some very interesting topics. It's going to be looking at racism as well. You know, there's a lot of kids. It's called the Black Bridget Jones Diaries, and this book very much shows how much of an impact being black would have on that type of storyline, and how much deeper that type of storyline is going to become if we are going to take things like race into the picture. I absolutely love this one and I couldn't recommend it more. I definitely feel like this is a book that everybody could read and everybody would love. It does have some trigger warnings, of course, like self-harm, which I already hinted at. It does have some very graphic sex scenes as well, so if you're not comfortable with that, then this definitely also isn't really one for you. But so yeah, definitely look up trigger warnings if you need them, because I probably am not thinking of all of them at this point. Second question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2020, and I must say that I haven't read a sequel to a book that I read in 2019 or before. You know, every sequel I've read this year has been a sequel to a book a series I've started in 2020. So I'm going to have to answer with one of those, and so I'm going to be answering with a series in total basically. And I've chosen Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is a comic book series which I barely read, you know. I have like a couple of comic book series, but really just one I think on here, and the rest are graphic novels probably. And I used to read comic books when I was a child, but I haven't done so recently anymore, and so I've been very happily surprised with Saga, and I might want to check out some more popular comic book series. But so Saga is a sci-fi comic book series in which we're looking at two people. It's kind of a Romeo and Juliet story. There are two people from like warring races who this fall in love with each other and decide to start a family, and then have to go into hiding as people are hunting them down. It's very good. It has a lot of representation. It does have like some very graphic scenes. It has an interesting art style that I really like, and yeah, it's doing some very interesting things in my opinion. It's very funny, and like I will say the first one is like meh. I think that happens a lot with comic books, where like the first one, because these volumes are so short, the first one is so introductory that you don't really get enough of a feel for the series to get hooked. But with the second one I was immediately hooked, so I would definitely say if you're going to go into it, give it more than just the first volume before you decide whether you want to continue or not. So the third question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to read, and I'm going to go with Weather by Jenny Offill. This is a book that has been on my pile of possibilities 3 times already, I think. So it will be for August, and I'm secretly hoping it will actually make it onto the book or long list, so that it'll be perfect for me to read it at that point. So Weather by Jenny Offill is a literary fiction novel. It is relatively short, so why I haven't gone around to it beats me. But it is a book, as far as like the gist of the story that I have is that she is somebody who's working for like a library or something like that, and she gets sent in questions by people, and so she needs to find answers to them. But so she needs to find answers to like a huge load of different diverse topics, so she's very much looking into very different sort of facts. And the thing that kind of sold this book to me is the fact that it's apparently going to be looking into it's a book that talks about climate change, and that gives a pretty bleak view of our current situation. But so yeah, this one has definitely been on my radar, and I've seen a couple of people read it in the meantime. I really love it, so I definitely do want to also read it. Fourth question is the most anticipated release for the second half of this year. Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. I think everybody who reads Stormlight Archive and has to answer this question has the same answer. Rhythm of War. There's no other option. I've been waiting for this book since I finished Oathbringer, and so excited to have it come out. It comes out when I am on holiday in Portugal, so unless Corona is going to stick around and my holiday in Portugal is going to be cancelled, I'm going to have to start with a delay. I'm going to have to wait it out until I'm back from holiday. So I'm secretly actually already hoping for that holiday to be cancelled. No, I will definitely want my holiday, but yeah, it was a bummer when I realized these dates match. Question number 5 is biggest disappointment, and I want to stress out that this is biggest disappointment. It is not the worst book I've read this year. There are other contenders for that, but it is my biggest disappointment, and that is going to be Crooked Kingdom. Now, it could be Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, but I was still somewhat okay with Six of Crows. You know, I gave it a 4-star rating. I think that should have actually been a 3-star rating, but there were definitely elements to Six of Crows that I thought were like good, and that I thought were like encouraging, and that I was hoping that like the things that I didn't like about Six of Crows, that they would disappear in Crooked Kingdom. But basically what I didn't like about Six of Crows just continued on into the next one and got like reinforced. So yeah, Crooked Kingdom for me, main problem, because I'm definitely not going to dive into it too much in this video, but my main problem with it is the convenience, is the fact that I felt like there were 0 stakes, because every single time that something threatened to go wrong, like something convenient would happen that would like turn things around, and like yeah, it would be explained as if they had like a contingency plan. But I definitely felt like that was just like let's snap our fingers, and then suddenly this big problem is no longer a problem, because I knew he was going to do that from the beginning. So yeah, that meant that I just didn't really get invested at all with this book anymore. So yeah, I think the final 100 pages I had to drag myself through this one. So yeah, for me this is my biggest disappointment of this year. Definitely. Sixth question is biggest surprise, and I'm going to go with Spring by Ellie Smith. I don't own a physical copy of this one, but I listened to this in one go while I was sick, and I don't know whether that had anything to do with it, with the fact that I have consumed it in one go or not, because I'm like alone in this opinion almost, but I love this book. I gave it a 5-star rating, and this is the third book in a seasonal quartet that Ellie Smith is writing, and the kind of idea behind it is that she is writing as close to publication date as possible. So her books are very much of the time, they're very much current. And the first two books, the first one, it had elements I enjoyed, but still overall I didn't necessarily get along with the style that much, or couldn't follow along that much. I have zero memories of my experience with winter, but so I wasn't necessarily expecting much going into this one, because I just knew that I liked certain things about the way that the story was told, but it just never fully worked for me. But with this one, it just, yeah, this one was a book for me. It worked. I loved all of the themes that were being introduced into this one. I just loved this one, but I know that a lot of people don't like it. So like, if you are new to Ellie Smith, just try one of her books out. But it's a style that I think you might actually have to just like get used to. I don't know whether that's the reason why I love this third book of hers that I read, but all of a sudden something clicked and I loved it. So yeah, that's going to be my very vague explanation about this book. I didn't even give you a premise. So in Spring we are following mainly two storylines. We're following a not an elderly guy, but a guy at the end of his career. He is a director. He is a movie director who's kind of having to make decisions about his career, because he was always a lot on the like artsy side, but now he's kind of considering like compromising his artistic vision in order to be able to get work. And so the second perspective is a woman who is working in a sort of refugee center where they are keeping people who have entered into the UK until they can get like fully registered, or until they are returned to the place that they came from. And she has been very much dehumanized by this job. She very much no longer sees the subject there as human beings, until one day a girl like manages to infiltrate the facility and starts asking questions about the way in which these people are being treated. And so yeah, this girl is somewhat of a sort of like magical realism element to the story, because she's kind of popping up out of nowhere. Nobody knows like who she's linked to, who her parents are, for example, or anything like that. And she also like seems to know more than she should be knowing, or she has like a sort of wisdom that transcends her age. And I love magical realism, so that could also be a reason why I love that sort of element to this story. Next up, I'm going to, the seventh question is favorite new author, but I'm going to just say that that is Chigozie Obioma and Candice Carty-Williams for the two books that I answered as my favorite books of the year. So for An Orchestra of Minorities, which is by Chigozie Obioma, and Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. Next up, I'm going to combine questions 8 and 9, which is a newest fictional crush and your favorite character, because I don't really get fictional crushes, and so I just think a fictional crush for me would just be like my new favorite character, and that would be Alizade Al-Qahtani from the City of Brass, or from the Devabad trilogy. So I have at this point completed the entire trilogy. I have mixed experiences with the trilogy. Like the first book was a 5-star read for me, and it just went down from there for me personally, because I know a lot of people have the opposite effect, and I guess that indeed has to do with the type of story you prefer. You know, for me, I love the sort of political intrigue and sort of character focus of the first one, and I didn't like more plot-driven choices that were made in the later books. But so Alizade is a prince of the Jinn realm, and he is very much struggling with loyalty. So he's very religious, and he has a lot of beliefs about what he should be doing in the name of his faith, and so he looks at the way that they are treating certain people in his city, and he wants to make changes there. However, he is a prince, so the reason why these people are being treated in that way is because his father allows for them to be treated that way. There's a lot of prejudice against these people, and so his father very much does like stand by those ideas. And so he's very much struggling with, you know, how far can he go to try and better these people's lives while having to do so behind his father's back, and while possibly compromising his father's reign. I loved this character. I love him throughout the series. He has an interesting character arc as well, and yeah, I just love him. He's a sweetheart. Next up is a book that made you cry, and for that one I am going to go with The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. This is a light, teary book, let's say. It has so many heartwarming scenes, but it also has a couple of heartbreaking ones. So this is all about a cat called Nana, and Nana has just adopted a human at the beginning of this book, but after a few years her human has to get rid of her because of circumstances. We are not introduced to these circumstances at the beginning of the book, but you can imagine that they're going to be quite harrowing. And so throughout this book he is going to be visiting old friends and trying to see who can take this cat. It's a beautiful book about the relationship between humans and their animals, so it's very much looking at that deep bond between a pet and its owner, but it's also very much about human relationships. It's very much looking at how human communication can sometimes be lacking, and how wounds can stay open for years, and we're very much going to be trying to close some of these wounds, or trying to rectify some miscommunication that happened earlier in their lives. Next up, a book that made you happy. So I don't really have any sort of laugh out loud books or anything like that, because I don't tend to read funny books or anything like that, but I'm going to go with the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I have yet to read the final book, but apart from that I've read every book this year so far, and I just love these books, and I think that they have such a nice light character to them, but they also delve into quite important, heavier topics that especially for young kids, which is the age demographic that this is targeted for, especially for young kids. There's definitely a lot to be grasped out of this story, and I just really love the way that it plays with the formula. And in the beginning it sticks to that formula pretty closely, but then it starts to play around with that, and I like the way it introduces new words and stuff like that, and so it does have its very funny moments as well. The second to last question is the most beautiful book you've bought this year, and I'm going to pick one that I bought in January, and that is Songs of Innocence and Experience by William Blake. This is a poetry collection. It has gold foiling, and it has the original art print on one side and the transcribed poem on the other side. So William Blake, apart from being a poet, he was also an illustrator. He had his own sort of printing company, and so he made these illustrations for his poems himself. And actually, interestingly enough, they haven't been able to recreate the exact process that he used, which is kind of mind-boggling to imagine that a process that was being used in the 19th century, I think, beginning of the 19th century, cannot be reproduced at this point. They cannot reproduce the exact sort of mix of chemicals that created these sort of art prints. So I really love this small edition. It's super cute. It's got that gold foiling, and that art print is just so amazing. So yeah, I had to choose that one. And then the final question of this tag is to talk about the book that you still need to read for the end of the year. I have two. So one of them is a buddy read that I just signed up for, because I already have too many books that I'm a bit too daunted to read, and this one was actually not planned for this year, but because a book, a read-along was being hosted for it, I jumped on it because I was like, yeah, I need this in order to get myself to read this book at some point. And that would be The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is a 19th century, I think, as well, French novel that is I'm going to be looking at a character who gets imprisoned for some reason or other. I don't know exactly why, and it's basically a tale of revenge. He will try to, I don't know, but I don't know whether he tries to break out or whether he's released after some time and then tries to take revenge. But it's supposedly like the classic tale of revenge. I've heard nothing but good things about this. My mother was so excited when I said that I was going to finally be reading it. So yeah, this huge chunker is one of the final big books on my shelf, one of the final over 1,000-page books that I have. And the other one that I still need to read is another one of those. But technically it's not, because I have it in 2 parts. This is part 2 because I actually don't know where part 1 is. I think at some point I was thinking of reading it apparently, and so that will be in my bedroom somewhere. So this is the Don Quixote by Don Diego de Cervantes. This is the Spanish edition. It is altogether 1,500 pages. I don't know why I'm making myself read this one. I have heard people say that they really enjoy it. I don't know why, but I feel like I'm not going to enjoy this book, so I've been super daunted getting into it. And so yeah, if you've read the Don Quixote and you liked it, otherwise don't let me know. Then tell me down below, because I need some more inspiration to dive into this one. But so yeah, this is 16th century, I think. Yeah, 16th, 17th century book about a guy who goes mad from reading too much literature, basically. We have Don Quixote, who is reading a lot of literature and then starts to go off on his own quest to try and save the fair maiden. But basically he's just like hallucinating and doing crazy stuff. But I don't know how you're feeling 1,500 pages with that concept. So it better be worth it. But so yeah, that is it from me for the mid-year book freakout tag. I hope you enjoyed this video and wish me luck for like the big books that I still need to get to. Let me know if you've read any of these books, because I would definitely love to talk about them down below. And let me know what your favorite book of the year has been so far, because we're always looking for suggestions. I'm not allowed to buy them, but I'm still looking for suggestions. So yeah, see you guys for the next one.